The phone call came at 2:47 p.m. on what should have been the happiest day of the year. Mrs. Adewale's hands trembled as she pressed the device against her ear, expecting to hear her daughter Chioma's excited voice telling her about the city lights, the amusement park rides, the ice cream that tasted like heaven. Instead, she heard breathing, heavy, deliberate, predatory. Then a voice scraped through the speaker like rusted metal dragging across concrete. "Your daughter is ours now. 5 million naira. You have 48 hours. The phone clattered to the kitchen floor. Mrs. Adewale screamed, tore through the afternoon silence of Afang like a blade through fabric, sharp and devastating and utterly final. Within minutes, the screaming spread like wildfire through the small town, because Mrs. Adewale wasn't the only parent who received that call. 23 other phones rang that afternoon. 23 other voices delivered the same cold, mechanical threat. 23 other families felt their world collapse in the space between one heartbeat and the next. And somewhere deep in the forest, 24 children sat blindfolded in darkness, their small hands clutching each other, their voices whispering prayers their mothers had taught them, wondering if Santa Claus had always been this cruel. But to understand how evil learned to wear red and smile at children, we need to go back 7 days. 7 days before Christmas. 7 days before innocence died in Afang. But before we go further, let me tell you something. They say you might just get lucky if you subscribe to this channel. Maybe it's superstition. Maybe it's just the universe's way of rewarding those who stay informed, who seek wisdom, who choose to learn from stories that matter. Now, let's continue. For 7 years, the town of Afang had celebrated what they called the Gloryville Santa experience. It started small. A few parents pooling money together to hire someone to dress as Father Christmas and distribute gifts at the church. The children loved it. Their faces would light up like candles when the red-suited figure walked through those church doors, his deep voice booming with laughter, his arms full of wrapped presents that seemed to multiply like loaves and fishes. But what made this Santa different, what made him magical, was the mystery. Nobody knew who he was. Not the parents, not the church council, not even the children who hugged him every year and whispered their wishes into his ear. His real name was Amos, but the town only knew him as Father Christmas. He arrived every year on the last Sunday before Christmas in a red van that seemed to appear from nowhere. He performed his duties with such joy, such genuine warmth, that parents would tear up watching their children's faces transform with wonder. And then he would leave, disappear back into whatever mysterious life he lived outside of that red suit. Pastor Dada, the shepherd of Gloryville Church, protected this mystery fiercely. Whenever parents tried to request a private meeting with Amos, whenever someone suggested they should know who this man really was, the pastor would raise his hand and speak in that calm, authoritative voice that made people feel foolish for questioning. "You want to ruin the magic for the children?" he would say, his eyes soft but firm. "Some things are better left mysterious. Faith isn't about seeing everything clearly. It's about trusting in goodness." The parents would nod, they would agree, they would silence their doubts and think, yes, maybe some mysteries are meant to stay beautiful. But mysteries are dangerous things, because while the town was busy protecting the magic, someone else was studying it, measuring it, planning how to weaponize it. His name was Lai, and he had been watching Afang for 5 years.
Lai was not the kind of evil that announced itself with violence and chaos. He was the quiet kind, the patient kind, the kind that sits in shadows and watches and learns and waits for the perfect moment to strike. For 5 years, Lai came to Afang during the Christmas season. He would sit at the back of Gloryville Church during services, his face forgettable, his clothes plain, his presence so unremarkable that not a single person remembered seeing him. But Lai remembered everything. He watched how parents contributed money each year, counting the cash that disappeared into collection baskets. He watched how the children screamed with joy when Father Christmas arrived, how they ran toward that red suit without a single thread of suspicion. He watched how Pastor Dada defended the tradition, how the entire town had built a wall of trust around this annual ritual. And Lai smiled to himself in those back pews, thinking the same thought over and over. These people are too easy. They believe anything that wears red. Lai wasn't working alone. He had assembled a crew of 5 men, each one more desperate and dangerous than the last. Men who would watch their own lives crumble and decided that if the world was going to take from them, they would take back harder, crueler, without mercy or remorse. Together, they studied the logistics of the Gloryville Santa experience like military strategists planning an invasion. They mapped the routes, they timed the patterns, they identified weaknesses in the church's security, which was really no security at all, just faith and tradition holding hands in the dark. But they needed someone on the inside, someone who knew the church intimately, someone who could provide the final piece of information they needed. That someone was Chukwu, the church's sound engineer. Chukwu was a thin man with quick hands and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He carried microphones and speakers every Sunday, set up equipment for the choir, fixed broken wires in the back rooms where nobody watched. He was invisible in his usefulness, essential but unnoticed, and he was drowning in debt. Lai found him one evening outside a bar, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow with the kind of desperation that makes men do unspeakable things. "You look like someone who needs a solution," Lai said, sliding into the seat beside him. Chukwu glanced up. "Who are you?" "Someone who pays well for simple information." The conversation started carefully. Lai spoke in riddles and hypotheticals, testing the waters, seeing how far Chukwu's desperation stretched. And when he saw that it stretched far enough, when he saw that hunger and fear had already hollowed out whatever conscience once lived in Chukwu's chest, Lai leaned closer. "Tell me about Father Christmas," he whispered. Chukwu's eyes widened. "What about him?" "Everything." And so Chukwu talked. He talked about how Amos came alone every year, how he was paid in cash, how nobody in the church had his home address or phone number, how he was just a kind man who loved children and wanted nothing more than to make them happy. How he would be so easy to replace. "Nobody has ever seen his real face," Chukwu said, his voice barely audible over the bar's noise. "The beard covers everything, the hat sits low. Even I don't know what he really looks like." Lai's smile spread slowly across his face, like oil spreading across water. Perfect.
Lai spent the next 2 weeks becoming Amos's friend. He found out where Amos lived, a modest house on the outskirts of a neighboring town. He learned Amos's routines, his habits, his schedule. And then he simply appeared one day, smiling broadly, carrying a bottle of palm wine and acting like they were old friends reuniting. "Amos!" he called out, waving enthusiastically. "I've heard so much about you. The children in Afang won't stop talking about Father Christmas." Amos, who was gentle by nature and trusting by design, smiled back. "You're from Afang? My cousin's children attend Gloryville Church. They love you." That was all it took. An invented connection, a warm smile, the appearance of shared community. They sat together that afternoon. They talked about children and Christmas and the joy of giving. Amos spoke about his work with such genuine passion that Lai almost felt something twist uncomfortably in his chest. Almost. But greed is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs everything, even the faint whispers of conscience. Over the next week, Lai visited 3 more times. Each visit he brought something: food, drinks, laughter. The performance of friendship so convincing that Amos began to look forward to his visits, began to trust this stranger who seemed to appreciate his work. Then came the night before the scheduled trip. December 22nd, the night everything changed. Lai arrived with Chukwu. They brought beer and fried fish and easy conversation. The 3 men sat in Amos's small living room talking about the next day's big event. "You must be excited," Lai said, opening a beer bottle. "Taking the children to the city. That's a beautiful gesture." Amos nodded, his eyes bright. Pastor Dada suggested it. He thought the children deserved something special this year. A day trip to see the city lights, visit an amusement park, eat good food. I'm honored to be part of it. "You deserve rest tonight," Chukwu said, passing Amos a drink. "Long day tomorrow. This'll help you sleep well."
Amos took the glass. He smiled at these two men he thought were friends. He raised the glass in a small toast. "To making children happy," he said. He drank. The liquid went down smooth at first. Then came the bitter aftertaste, the strange metallic coating on his tongue. Amos frowned, looking down at the glass. "This tastes," he started to say, but the words died in his throat. His vision blurred. The room tilted sideways. His muscles went slack, as if someone had cut invisible strings holding him upright. "Lie," he whispered, his voice small and confused and terribly frightened. What is happening to me?" Lai leaned forward, and for the first time Amos saw his real face, not the smiling friend, not the warm visitor, but the cold, calculating predator who had been circling him for weeks. "Rest now, Father Christmas," Lai said softly. "Your work is finished." Amos tried to speak, tried to stand, tried to scream, but the poison moved faster than thought. His body collapsed forward, his breathing became shallow, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the real Father Christmas died in his living room, killed by men wearing the masks of friendship. Chukwu started shaking. Oh God, what have we done?" "We've removed an obstacle," Lai said calmly. "Now help me carry him." They moved Amos's body in darkness, wrapped in old blankets, carried between two men whose hands shook with what they'd done. Amos made his final journey to a place he'd never visited in life, an old bridge on the outskirts of town, abandoned, forgotten, the kind of place where water ran dark beneath concrete and nobody came unless they were hiding something. "Here," Lai said, setting down his end of the burden. Chukwu looked around frantically. "Someone will find him. Someone will know." "Nobody comes here, and even if they do, by the time they find him, we'll be gone. The children will be ransomed, the money will be collected, and Father Christmas will just be a memory." They dug in silence, the shovels biting into earth that hadn't been disturbed in years. The hole grew deeper, darker, like they were digging into the very soul of evil itself. When it was deep enough, they lowered Amos into the ground. Before they covered him, Lai paused. He looked down at the man who had dedicated himself to making children smile, the man who asked for nothing in return except the joy of giving. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in Lai's eyes. Then it was gone. "Cover him," he said. The earth fell. The ground closed. The secret was buried. And somewhere in the darkness, something shifted, as if the universe itself had registered this crime and marked it down in blood.
Morning came soft and beautiful. The sun rose over Afang like it always did, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, indifferent to the evil preparing to unfold beneath its light. Outside Gloryville Church, a large bus waited. Its engine hummed steadily. Its doors stood open like a mouth waiting to swallow. Parents gathered with their children, bundled against the morning cold, their faces bright with excitement and nervousness. This was new. Father Christmas had never taken the children anywhere before. But Pastor Dada had assured them it would be wonderful, an adventure, a memory they would cherish forever. And there, standing beside the bus door, was Father Christmas himself. The red suit looked perfect. The beard was thick and white. The hat sat low on his head, covering his forehead. His voice boomed with cheerful authority. "Good morning! Good morning! Are we ready for an adventure?" The children screamed in excitement. "Yes, Father Christmas!" But this wasn't Amos. This was Lai, wearing the stolen suit, performing the role he'd studied for 5 years. Every gesture was practiced, every word was calculated, every smile was a lie wrapped in red fabric. Mrs. Adewale knelt beside her daughter, Chioma, adjusting her scarf. "Be good, my love. Listen to Father Christmas." "I will, Mama," Chioma said, her eyes wide with wonder. Across the crowd, Mr. Akalo held his daughter Amara close. Something twisted in his gut, some instinct he couldn't name, some primitive warning system screaming silently in his blood. He leaned down and whispered, "Come here, baby, just 1 second." Amara stood still as her father opened her small backpack. His hands moved quickly, expertly, sewing something into the lining, a tiny button-sized device, a tracking phone so small it looked like a coin. "Daddy, "What are you doing?" Amara asked. Just keep your bag with you, okay? Always, no matter what." "Okay, Daddy." He kissed her forehead, held her tight, tried to memorize the weight of her in his arms. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too, Daddy." Then she climbed onto the bus. 24 children in total, 24 smiling faces pressed against windows, waving at their parents. The fake Father Christmas climbed aboard. He turned back to the parents one last time, raising his hand in a grand wave. "We'll be back tomorrow evening. Don't worry. Santa will keep them safe." The doors closed. The engine roared to life. The bus pulled away. Parents waved and waved, their hands held high until the bus became a dot on the horizon, until it vanished completely into the distance. That was the last peaceful moment Afang would know for a very long time. For the first hour, the children sang. Christmas carols filled the bus, jingle bells and silent night and songs they'd learned in church, their voices high and pure and utterly trusting. Some children dozed, others pressed their faces against windows, watching the world slide by in shades of green and brown and blue. But then the bus turned, left the main highway. The smooth asphalt gave way to rough dirt road. The bus began to shake and rattle. Trees pressed closer on both sides, their branches reaching over the road like skeletal fingers. A boy named Emeka, sitting near the back, frowned. He was 11, old enough to know when something felt wrong. "Uncle Driver," Emeka called out, "this doesn't look like the way to the amusement park." The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. His jaw tightened. He said nothing. Emeka tried again, louder. "Uncle, where are we going?" This time, the man in the red suit stood up, but there was no more cheerful voice, no more warm laughter. His voice came out hard and cold as iron. "Sit down and shut your mouth." The bus went silent. Every child froze. Their songs died in their throats. Their smiles fell from their faces like masks dropping to the floor. Little Chioma started to whimper. "I want my mama." "You'll see your mama when your parents pay us," another voice said from the front. And that's when the children realized Father Christmas wasn't taking them to an amusement park. Father Christmas wasn't kind. Father Christmas was a monster wearing red. The bus drove deeper into the forest, deeper and deeper until the sunlight could barely penetrate the canopy above, until the world outside became nothing but shadows and trees and the terrible certainty that they were far, far from home. Finally, the bus stopped. They had arrived at an abandoned warehouse. The building looked like something from a nightmare, its walls cracked and stained, its roof rusted and sagging, its windows empty and dark like the eyes of a skull. "Everybody out," Lai commanded. The children climbed down slowly, their legs trembling. Some were crying openly now. Others held hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. "Please," Amara whispered, "please take us home." A kidnapper laughed. "Home? You think this is about you going home? This is about your parents paying us. Otherwise, you become orphans today." Blindfolds came out, rough cloth wrapped around small faces, stealing away their vision, leaving them in darkness. "Walk," someone commanded. They stumbled forward, their hands reaching out, touching shoulders and arms and trying desperately not to fall. Inside the warehouse, they were pushed down onto thin mats on a concrete floor. The blindfolds came off. 24 pairs of eyes blinked in the dim light, looking around at their prison, at the rusty walls, at the buckets of water in the corner, at the men standing guard with hard faces and harder hearts. And in that moment, Christmas died in their souls.
The kidnappers worked methodically. They went through each child's phone, finding parent contacts, making lists, calculating ransoms based on whispered intelligence about which families had money and which had more. Then the calls began. Mrs. Adewale was folding laundry when her phone rang. She smiled, thinking Chioma was calling to tell her about the city. She answered cheerfully, "Hello, my baby. Are you having fun?" The voice that responded made her blood turn to ice.
Your daughter is with us now. 5 million naira. You have 48 hours. If you call the police, she dies. If you tell anyone, she dies. If you don't bring the money, she dies. We'll call you back with instructions." The phone went dead. Mrs. Adewale's scream could be heard 3 houses away. Before anyone could reach her, another phone rang 2 streets over. Mr. Okonkwo answered, his voice warm with anticipation. "Daniel, my son, tell me about—" "Bring 10 million naira or forget your son forever." Click. Mr. Okonkwo stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds. Then his legs gave way and he collapsed, hitting the floor hard, unconscious before his wife could reach him. The call spread like plague. Every few minutes, another phone rang. Another parent answered with joy and heard horror instead. Another family's world shattered like glass hitting concrete. A mother screamed, "Take my life instead, please, take me." A father begged, "Let me hear her voice, just let me know she's alive." Another mother grabbed her phone with both hands, sobbing, "What do you want from us? We're not rich, we're not rich." But the kidnappers had no mercy, no flexibility, no humanity left in their voices. Just cold, mechanical demands, money or death, pay or lose them forever. Within 2 hours, 23 families in Afang knew that their children had been stolen, that Father Christmas had been a lie, that trust had led them straight into hell. The church bell rang at 4 p.m., not for celebration, not for prayer, for emergency, for crisis, for the kind of catastrophe that stops time itself. People ran from every direction. Some came barefoot, not bothering with shoes. Some came with their hair uncovered, their wrappers hastily tied. Some came carrying framed pictures of their children, clutching them like shields against reality. Inside Gloryville Church, chaos reigned. Women lay on the floor, rolling and wailing, their cries tearing through the air like knives. Some beat their chests in traditional mourning. Some tore at their wrappers. Some called their children's names over and over, as if saying the name enough times might bring them back. "Chioma! Chioma! Chioma! Daniel! My Daniel! Amara! Please, God, bring back my Amara!" Men paced like caged animals, their faces twisted with rage and helplessness. Some punched walls, some held their heads and rocked back and forth. Some stood perfectly still, their eyes dead, their minds unable to process what had happened. Pastor Dada climbed to the altar, his face wet with tears, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "God," he cried out, his voice breaking, "God, help us, save our children. We trusted you. We trusted the tradition. How did evil get inside your house?" But even as he prayed, even as the congregation wailed and begged and bargained with heaven, the phones kept ringing. More threats, more demands, more deadlines ticking down like bombs waiting to explode. Afang had never known darkness like this. And somewhere in the forest, 24 children sat huddled together, their tears falling silently, their prayers whispered into the cold air, wondering if their parents even knew they were gone. While the town collapsed into chaos, one man moved with purpose. Mr. Akalo didn't go to the church to wail and weep. He didn't fall on the floor. He didn't call out to God or fate or justice. He went to the police station because Mr. Akalo had done something that nobody else thought to do. He had prepared for betrayal. His daughter Amara had that tiny tracking device sewn into her backpack, invisible to everyone except the man who put it there. It was connected to a phone number only he knew, a signal that could be activated remotely, a lifeline in case the unthinkable happened. And the unthinkable had happened. Mr. Akalo burst through the police station doors, his eyes wild but focused, his voice commanding attention. "My daughter is among the missing children," he said, his words coming fast, "and I can find her." The officer on duty looked up, skeptical. "Sir, we're doing everything—" "Listen to me." Mr. Akalo slammed his hands on the desk.
I planted a tracking device in my daughter's bag before she left. A button phone, small, hidden. I can activate it remotely and get her location." The officer stood up fast. "You did what?" "I didn't trust it. Something felt wrong, so I prepared. And now I need you to help me track the signal." Within minutes, they were in a back office. Mr. Akalo pulled out his phone, opened a hidden app, and pressed a sequence of buttons. Nothing happened. His heart hammered in his chest. Come on, please work. More buttons, more desperate prayers. Still nothing. "They might have moved," the officer said gently, "or the device might have been damaged, or—" Then the screen blinked. A small red dot appeared on the map. Mr. Akalo's breath caught in his throat. There, that's her. That's my Amara." The officer leaned close, studying the coordinates. That's Ocean State, deep in the forest, an old industrial area. "Can you track it?" "If that signal stays active, yes, we can mobilize a tactical team." "Then do it, now, before they move again." The officer grabbed his radio, started making calls. Within an hour, a team was assembling. Armed officers, tactical specialists, men trained for exactly this kind of operation. But they had to move carefully. One wrong step, one early warning, and the kidnappers might panic, might hurt the children, might disappear even deeper into the wilderness. So they waited, watched, tracked that precious red dot like it was the only light in an infinite darkness. And Mr. Akalo sat in that police station, his eyes never leaving the screen, whispering the same prayer over and over. "Stay alive, baby. Daddy is coming. Just stay alive."
Back in the warehouse, Christmas Eve arrived, not with joy, but with terror. The children had been captive for over 24 hours now. Some had stopped crying because they had no tears left. Some sat in shocked silence, their minds retreating to safer places. Some whispered prayers their mothers taught them, repeating the words like protective spells against evil. The kidnappers grew more agitated as time passed. Some of the parents had started paying, desperate transfers of money they didn't have, selling property, borrowing from loan sharks, liquidating their entire lives to buy back their children. But others couldn't pay, didn't have that kind of money, would never have that kind of money even if they sold everything they owned and begged on streets for 1,000 years. "What do we do with the ones whose parents can't pay?" one kidnapper asked Lai. Lai looked at the children with cold calculation. "We make an example, show the other parents we're serious." "You mean?" "Pick one, anyone. Call the parents. Let them hear what happens when they don't pay." The kidnapper's face went pale. "Lai, they're children. We agreed to scare them, not—" "You want your share of the money or not? Do what I tell you." The argument escalated, voices rose, and the children heard every word. Emeka, the 11-year-old boy who first questioned the route, stood up slowly. His legs shook, but his voice came out strong. "You're going to hell, all of you. God sees what you're doing, and you're going to hell." Lai walked over to him, grabbed him by the collar, lifted him slightly off the ground. "Say that again." Emeka's voice trembled but didn't break. "Hell, you're going to hell." For a moment, something flickered in Lai's eyes. Something almost like recognition, almost like shame. Then he dropped the boy, turned away. "Nobody touches the children tonight. We wait for more payments, then we decide." But that night, the warehouse filled with sounds that would haunt those children forever. Sounds of men arguing, sounds of threats being made over phones, sounds of parents begging and crying through speakers, their voices distorted but their anguish crystal clear. And outside, in the dark forest, something was moving. Something with guns and tactical gear and GPS coordinates leading them straight to that warehouse. Justice, finally, was coming. They struck at 3 a.m. The police tactical team surrounded the warehouse in complete silence. No sirens, no warnings, just trained professionals moving through darkness like shadows with purpose. The commander raised his hand, signaling positions. Officers crouched behind cover, weapons ready, every exit mapped, every window accounted for. Inside, most of the kidnappers were dozing.
Only 2 remained awake, smoking cigarettes and counting the money they'd already collected. "How much so far?" one asked. 40 million, and we're not even done yet." They laughed, counted bills, imagined the lives they'd buy with stolen childhood innocence. Then the commander whispered into his radio, "On my count. 3, 2, 1, go." The doors exploded inward. "Police! Down! Get down! Hands where we can see them!" The warehouse erupted into chaos. Kidnappers scrambled, reaching for weapons, trying to run, shouting contradictory commands at each other. Flashlights cut through the darkness like spotlights revealing rockroaches. Gunshots rang out, warning shots. The ceiling above exploded in bursts of concrete dust. "Down! Now!" Children screamed. Officers shouted. Kidnappers dove for cover. One man tried to escape through a back window. An officer tackled him mid-climb, slamming him to the ground, cuffing his hands behind his back with practiced efficiency. Another tried to grab a child, using little Chioma as a human shield. "Stay back, or I'll—" He never finished the sentence. An officer's taser hit him square in the chest. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. And then, in the chaos, Lai ran. He still wore parts of that red suit, the pants, the boots, like he'd been interrupted mid-transformation, caught between the monster and the disguise. He sprinted towards a side door, his heart hammering, his mind screaming, "Escape! Escape! Escape!" But an officer blocked his path. "Not today, Father Christmas." Lai swung wildly. The officer ducked, swept Lai's legs, brought him down hard, face first into concrete, tasting blood and defeat. The officer ripped away the fake beard that still clung to Lai's face. "Who are you?" Lai's real face emerged. Ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of face you'd pass on the street and never remember. Evil rarely looks like monsters. Usually, it looks like everyone else. Within minutes, all 5 kidnappers were subdued, cuffed, lined up against the wall like criminals in a lineup, which is exactly what they were. And then the officers turned their attention to the children. "You're safe now," a female officer said softly, kneeling among them. "You're safe. We're taking you home." Some children burst into tears. Some laughed hysterically. Some just stared, unable to process that the nightmare was ending. Amara clutched her backpack, the one with the hidden device, and whispered, "My daddy. I want my daddy." "Your daddy is the reason we found you. Your daddy never stopped looking," the officer said, smiling through her own tears. "Always, baby, always." The police vans pulled into Afang on Christmas morning, not with sirens blaring, not with lights flashing, just quietly, gently, like a whisker after a scream. The church gates opened. People poured out, running, stumbling, calling names. The van doors opened. Children stepped out one by one, and the world exploded with joy. Mrs. Adewale saw Chioma and simply collapsed, fell to her knees, arms outstretched, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Chioma ran into those arms, and they held each other like 2 people drowning who'd finally found shore. Mr. Okonkwo grabbed his son Daniel, lifted him off the ground, spun him around, kissed his face 100 times, whispering, my boy, my precious boy." And then Mr. Akalo saw Amara. She stood at the van door, her backpack still clutched in her small hands, her eyes searching the crowd. "Daddy!" she screamed. He ran like he'd never run before, scooped her up, held her so tight she could barely breathe. "I knew you'd find me. I knew Daddy would come." His tears fell into her hair. "Always, baby, always." All around them, families reunited, laughter mixed with crying, relief mixed with the residual terror, joy mixed with the terrible knowledge of how close they'd come to losing everything. Pastor Dada stood at the church entrance, watching. His face was wet. His shoulders shook. "Thank you," he whispered upward. "Thank you, God. Thank you."
In the police station, Lai sat chained to a metal table. The red suit was gone. The fake beard was gone. All that remained was a tired man with dead eyes and nothing left to lose. An officer sat across from him. "Talk. Tell us everything." Lai let out a long breath. His shoulders sagged. "I watched your town for 5 years," he said, his voice flat. "Every Christmas I sat in the back of that church. I watched how you trusted, how you believed anything your pastor told you. How you handed your children over to a stranger in a red suit without asking a single question. We trusted a tradition. You trusted blindly, Lai interrupted. You made it so easy. The perfect cover, the perfect disguise. A man nobody knew, a face nobody saw. I just had to study him, replace him, walk into your church wearing red, and you'd give me your children with smiles on your faces. The officer's jaw tightened. Where is the real Father Christmas? Where is Amos? Lai looked away. You'll find him under the old bridge, north side of town. We buried him there. The room went silent. You killed him. The poison killed him. I just helped it along. And the church sound engineer, Chukwu? He's at his house, probably packing to run. He gave us the information we needed. Church schedule, security weaknesses, Amos's details. He was motivated by debt and fear. Powerful combination. Within hours, police arrested Chukwu, found him exactly where Lai said he'd be, cramming clothes into a bag, shaking so hard he could barely zip it closed. And at the old bridge, a search team began digging. It took them 3 hours to find him. The earth had settled over Amos like a final blanket, concealing what should never have been concealed. But truth has a way of surfacing, even when buried deep. When they pulled him out, carefully, respectfully, the town elder who came to identify him broke down completely. That's him. That's Amos, our Father Christmas. News spread through Afang like wind through dry grass. The real Santa was dead, had been dead all along. The man they trusted with their children on that bus had been a murderer wearing stolen clothes and a practiced smile. The town grieved all over again, but this time the grief was different, heavier, complicated with guilt and questions that had no good answers. How did we not know? How did we not see? How did we let this happen? 3 days after Christmas, Afang held a memorial service. They placed Amos's coffin at the front of Gloryville Church, surrounded by candles and flowers and small handmade cards from children whose lives he'd touched over 7 years. The cards said things like, "Thank you, Santa. You made me smile when I was sad. I love you, Father Christmas. You were real to me. You never wanted to be famous. You just wanted us to be happy. That's a real hero." Pastor Dada stood at the altar, his voice broken but determined. Amos was a good man. He asked for nothing, no recognition, no praise, not even for his face to be known. He only wanted to bring joy to children. And evil took that from him. Evil wore his clothes. Evil stole his legacy. He paused, his hands gripping the pulpit. But we learned something terrible and necessary. We learned that trust without verification is not faith, it's negligence. We learned that traditions can become traps. We learned that we must protect our children not just with love, but with wisdom. The congregation nodded. Some wept. Some sat in heavy silence. After the service, the church elders held an emergency meeting. It lasted 4 hours, and when it ended, they made their announcement.
The posters went up the next day. On every gate, every fence, every shop window, every church bulletin board. They were simple, direct, impossible to ignore. Public notice from Gloryville church elders. Effective immediately. 1. There will be no more Santa Claus visits to this church. 2. All future church activities involving children must have verified adult supervision with background checks. 3. No child will ever again be taken from this community without full parental accompaniment. 4. We encourage all families, question everything, verify everyone, protect fiercely. Let this tragedy be our teacher. Let our children's safety be our obsession. Evil does not always look like evil. Sometimes it wears red and carries gifts and speaks in gentle voices. Stay vigilant, stay protective, stay alive. The town read those posters in silence. Some people nodded in agreement. Some felt sadness at the death of tradition. Some felt angry at themselves for not questioning sooner. But everyone understood. The magic was gone. It had to be gone, because the price of keeping it had proven too high. The trial was swift. Lai, Chukwu, and the 3 other kidnappers stood before a judge whose face showed no mercy. The evidence was overwhelming. recorded phone calls, DNA evidence, testimony from 24 traumatized children, the body of Amos, whose autopsy revealed massive amounts of poison in his system. There was no defense, no argument, no plea that could soften what they'd done. The judge spoke in measured tones, but his words carried the weight of absolute moral certainty. You didn't just kidnap children. You weaponized tradition. You turned trust into a trap. You murdered a good man and wore his identity like a costume. You caused psychological damage that these children will carry for the rest of their lives. He paused, letting the words settle like stones dropping into still water. The law gives me the power to show mercy, but mercy is for those who show remorse, and I see none in your eyes. Lai stared straight ahead, emotionless, empty. Therefore, I sentence each of you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. You will spend every remaining day of your existence behind bars, contemplating the evil you've done. May God have mercy on your souls, because this court will not. The gavel fell. The kidnappers were led away. And Afang exhaled a long, painful breath it felt like they'd been holding for weeks. Christmas came again to Afang, but it was different now. Gloryville Church still decorated, still sang carols, still celebrated the birth of Christ with joy and reverence, but there was no Santa Claus. Instead, parents stayed with their children throughout every church activity. Names were checked, IDs were verified. Every adult volunteer went through background screening that would make intelligence agencies jealous. The children were different too. They laughed again, played again, enjoyed Christmas again. But there was something in their eyes now. A wariness, a knowledge that joy could be dangerous, that red suits could hide monsters, that the world was more complicated than they wanted to believe. Amero walked into church holding her father's hand. She was taller now. Her backpack no longer carried a hidden tracking device because she no longer went anywhere without her parents present. "Daddy," she said, looking up, "do you think Father Christmas is in heaven now, the real one?" Mr. Akalo knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Yes, baby. I think Amos is exactly where good people go, and I think he's proud of how brave you were. I miss when Christmas was just Christmas, when it wasn't scary. I know, but you know what? You survived something terrible. You came home. You're here, and that's its own kind of miracle." She nodded slowly, then smiled. "Can we get ice cream after church?" "Absolutely." Around them, other families had similar conversations, similar healing, similar small steps back towards normalcy. It would take time, maybe years, maybe forever, but they were alive. Their children were alive. And in Afang, that was the greatest gift of all.
On the anniversary, Pastor Dada stood before his congregation. "We gathered to remember what we lost and what we learned," he began. "Amos died because we valued mystery over safety. Our children suffered because we valued tradition over verification." He paused, looking at the families before him. "Ask questions, verify identities, protect fiercely. Never hand your children over to someone just because they're wearing a costume you trust. Evil is patient. It studies us. Our job is to be more vigilant than evil is patient." The congregation stood in silent agreement. Outside, someone had set up a snow machine. Soft, white flakes drifted down. The children ran out laughing, catching snowflakes, their trauma lighter now, manageable, survivable. Amara caught a snowflake in her palm. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," her father agreed. "Yes, it is." Christmas felt like Christmas again in Afang. Not innocent, not naive, but hopeful. And sometimes hope is the greatest miracle of all. The people of Afang learned their lesson in blood and tears. You don't have to. Verify, question, protect. Evil doesn't always announce itself with scary music. Sometimes it wears red. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it carries gifts. Teach your children that being polite is never more important than being safe. Listen to those small voices in your gut that say something feels wrong. They're your internal alarm system. Honor them. In Afang, 24 families ignored those whispers. 24 children paid the price. Don't let tradition become a trap. Don't let trust become negligence. The best gift you can give your children isn't wrapped in pretty paper. It's awareness, wisdom, the knowledge that they have permission to question anything that feels wrong. That's the gift that might one day save their life. If this story moved you, share it with parents who need to hear it. And don't forget, they say you might just get lucky if you subscribe to this channel. Hit that subscribe button for more stories that teach, warn, and protect. Because in a world where evil wears disguises, being informed might be the difference between tragedy and survival. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay wise, and never stop questioning.